Everybody, welcome back to AEG's podcast. Today I have my dear friend Colleen with the Experience Group, and we get to learn all the good work that she's been working on. Colleen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm very curious why you started the Experience Group.
Good question. And I get asked that a lot. I would consider myself like a casualty of COVID or a COVID career castaway kind of person. And for the first time in a very long time, I found myself among the masses of people looking for work, jobs, gigs, projects. And I had never in my career sort of hit a roadblock, but for the first time I did. And it seemed that the world decided somewhere along the way that hiring a highly skilled and wise professional over the age of 60 just wasn't conceivable. And I kept hearing the words overqualified. And really, what I was perfectly qualified, not overly qualified, but perfectly to help in ways that you can't capture on a 40-year resume. So I started to research, and this was about 2.5, 3 years ago, right at the beginning of the pandemic. I started to research and study. I decided to get certified as a retirement coach. And then I started to see the problem everywhere. It's kind of like when you go to buy like a red convertible and you think you want one, all of a sudden you see them on the road everywhere. Well, it was
Yeah.
the same kind of thing. So I decided, I'm going to see what I can do personally about revolutionizing this concept. And without question, and I've had a beautiful career. This is the most important work I've ever done. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And who do you serve and why?
Right. So we kind of serve three groups of people. The first group are individuals. I affectionately call them silver seals. These are people who have been retired without their permission,
Um,
retired and discovered that it isn't what they thought it was going to be, and it's much darker than they thought, or people who can see retirement on the horizon. And really what I do is I work with them. I kind of act as an agent, and I work with them one-on-one for a period of time to figure out what that next thing should be for them. And then I act as an agent and I match them with different
oh,
opportunities.
cool.
The other group is our companies that through our Age Smart employer program, I help them manage their aging workforce, removing age biases that live in buildings. And they're unconscious, a lot of them. People don't realize it's happening. And we create imaginative ways to use this multi-generational workforce that is clearly in the landscape now. And then lastly, I partner with financial services people, and as a retirement coach, I help them help their clients with the non-financial side of retirement. So we're just trying to make sure that people are prepared for this thing that we've coined retirement, and how can they extend their relevance and commitment and connection to the community.
Awesome. Well, that's very good. Good work. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
And why do you think and I think it does too, the word retirement just sounds so antiquated. Why do you think it needs an overhaul?
It is completely antiquated. And quite frankly, I would like the word just eradicated. But if
Yeah,
you look it up in the dictionary, here's what comes up: to
yeah.
depart, to remove, to retreat, to withdraw, to, move back, to recede. And I can't imagine doing any of those things or
Yeah.
having any of those words describe me for what is looking like 20 to 30 years. So this whole concept of retirement was formed in the 1800s. And I think one example is in 1874, our railroad system required employees to join pension plans at age 37 and stay there till 55.
Mm-hmm.
They really were buying loyalty, reducing strikes and turnover. But that's kind of how the model started. The Hudson Bay did a similar thing. But so much has changed that no, we're looking at 100-year lives right now. There are babies being born today that will live triple-digit lives. 60-year careers are fast replacing 40-year careers. So it's rendered the notion obsolete, or at minimum, I think rendered the time frame obsolete. And when it was first formed, life expectancy just wasn't what it is today, right? So now we have longevity, we add to that greater education, we add to that less physically demanding work, and we find ourselves in a place where we can do a lot more for a lot longer. When I looked Japan has no word that corresponds with this. It doesn't exist
Hmm.
just because they view their elders differently than we do in
Mhm.
North America. But there is a word that sort of corresponds, and the word is ikigai. And it is their foundational principle around purpose. And roughly translated means the reason to get up in the morning.
Oh,
To me, that sounds, this intersection of mission, person, profession, and purpose that they talk about sounds a lot more inspiring to me than withdrawing, becoming invisible, backing up, right? So the
right.
whole notion is really it's just decades old. It needs to be revamped. Actually, it needs to be eradicated. But
Agree.
yeah,
That's awesome. Well done. Very good.
thank you.
Ikigai. I'm going to start
Yeah,
saying that. Thank you.
you're welcome.
What can companies do to ensure that age bias is not an issue when they're making their decisions? What can we do for our members that are listening today?
Yeah, my research suggests that less than 10% of companies in North America who claim to have a diversity, equity, and inclusion program or statement include age.
Oh,
So, age smart employers, I think, would be wise to examine how they're managing this age force that is inevitable and unquestionable. Like things like auditing their recruiting process, right from the words that they put in their job search ads to the questions asked in interviews and to onboarding, there's a better way.
hmm.
Working with those in their company over the age of 50 or 60 much earlier as they look at some form of retirement. Mostly it happens really fast to people. It is like a month or two, and all of a sudden they go from employed to not.
Hmm.
I think creating innovative ways to retire people and still maintain the knowledge and wisdom. There are so many different ways to go about doing this. Welcoming this notion of unretirement. And I would argue that 5 years with what I call affectionately silver seals can be worth as much as 15 years with a new cadet. And so these wisdom workers that we're letting go are kind of like Sherpas, right? And we're taking these young climbers up the mountain and helping them avoid the dangers and the crevices of the ascent. And an ascent that people my age and older or close to me have done many, many times. And while there's progress being made, age just seems to fall through the cracks. I think we've been preconditioned over decades to just automatically just pick this number and decide that that's our best before date. And it's not just wrong. I think it's fiscally irresponsible too. In an economy that's awash with job openings, where business closures uh, uh, are happening all the time, the over 50s could literally solve the talent problem that exists. So if we want to retain and reattract this rich vein of talent that we have, it's obvious something has to be done differently. Right?
Agreed. I'm on the committee for Top 7 over 70 here in Alberta, and the amount of nominations that we receive with over 70s that are starting new things. In fact, Marjorie Zingle at 87 is starting a new tech company today. So awesome.
Oh, yeah, like I mean, Grandma Moses didn't even pick up a paintbrush till she was 79.
right?
I mean, John Glenn was 77 when he orbited the moon. I mean, there's
Exactly.
just countless stories. I'm excited. I have heard of the 7 over 70. We're working on a 6 over 60 program for Edmonton to see if we can start celebrating as well. Because there's
Awesome.
and statistically, businesses started by people over the age of 50 are remarkably last longer. They have a better chance of
Sure.
success. It's
Sure.
just experience, right?
More
Yeah,
experience. Yeah. Don't
yeah,
do that. Do more of
exactly.
that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. And you've mentioned some benefits to a multi-generational workforce. What are some others that you might have top of
Well,
mind?
I think for the first time, well, I know for the first time, we need to recognize that there are up to 5 generations in the same office at the same time. And tensions are kind of mounting because every generation has a sort of kids though these days perspective, right? And every generation has it. Um, but it can't be managed by simply like respecting your elders and being nice to old folks. The companies really, it would behoove them to figure this out, because this multi-generational workforce is a reality. And it is the end of retirement as we know it. And it means that successful workplaces of the future are going to have to lean towards an older workforce, at least for the next 10 or 20 years. It's simply not avoidable given the demographic truth. So I think age diverse teams are incredibly powerful, incredibly productive, and very profitable. And a lot of corporate blunders, I guess, or, well-intentioned misdirections could be avoided if we could do a better blend of the youth and ambition of the young people, the energy and ambition with the seasoned experience of age. If we fold those together, this diverse group can create something no generation can do on their own. But we're not programmed. We see people with best before dates that they're finished. And really, when of all the people that I talk to, and there have been a lot, these people are just actually, I would say, hitting their best. They're becoming the best they could be. And so lopping them off at this time just makes no sense to me.
Yeah, agreed. I'm so glad we're aligned. This is excellent. The ones that are planning for what they refer to as retirement are usually focused on finances, insurance, all of the money side of things. I'm assuming there's a dark side. What would that?
Yeah, there is. And I think that part is obviously very important. The financial side is important, but retirement, it just isn't the destination it used to be. When you can find yourself at that point looking at 30 years, that is a long, long time. That is a lot of time. And let's say that you do manage to save up enough money. Are you really ready? Do you even want this to happen to you? Some people are completely prepared for the financial side. Most, if not virtually everyone I've talked to, are not prepared for the non-financial side. We just haven't been thinking about it. And it's the non-financial side that is ultimately going to determine if you thrive or just go through the motions for, yes, like 20 or 30 years. It's kind of the rare time where we get to choose what we want to do, to be able to decide what's most important to you and how you're going to spend your time. And after conversations with, many people who have recently retired, the majority are disappointed and uninspired once the honeymoon kind of wears off. Like no one told them about this side of things. And so for what happened for many during their careers and their professions, they measured their progress and were rewarded feeling success by professional achievements and accolades and attaboys, and continued growth was encouraged and celebrated. There were raises and promotions, and all these relationships flourished, and a sense of purpose was fueled every day. Whether you wanted it to be or not, it was there for you. And I've heard so many say, when I retire, I'm going to
Yes,
lose
me too.
weight. I'm going to go to the gym. There is no magic elixir that comes with this that all of a sudden builds habits that didn't exist
That's
before.
right.
And nobody can golf every day, even if they can afford it. So what retirement does is it quickly brings to an end a countless number of relationships, really. Many who retire are sort of under this false belief that their colleagues and their customers will continue to connect, that their inbox will fill up with invitations to social calendars. And well, this is just not the case, because the world needs to keep moving. Like I know if our mechanic decided to retire, it would just mean I would find another mechanic and life would carry on, and unlikely that I would keep my relationship going with this past connection from the past. And that's the way it needs to be. The other significant change comes from a lack of rhythm or schedule that work provides. Like many think their freedom will give them so much time to do so much more than work. And for many, this is true. But for many, they find themselves kind of drifting. Like all of a sudden, the days just bleed into one another. And when you ask them what they're up to, they don't have an answer. Like they're
That's right.
uninspired.
Yeah.
They're kind of lost.
Hmm.
Um, And no one told them this was going to happen because we've been programmed to believe this is a thing you to aspire to. You've arrived, and it's not a destination.
No,
It's simply a transition. It's another stage, but you don't stay there. You don't just land there and right, the world is peachy, because it's not.
for sure. That is
Mhm.
so true. I've heard all the things that you've said from many of my friends as they, as you say, retire, and they'll send an email back and say, "Oh, you can take me off the newsletter now. I'm retired." I'm like, "Wow, okay, so you're not interested in knowing at all. Okay, that's
Well,
okay."
I think because we've been taught that. Like, I
Yeah.
think we've been conditioned
Mm-hmm.
that this is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Um, and that was fine when went to school to your 20, worked till you were 60, retired and died in 5 to 7 years. Like,
Yeah.
maybe it was fine then, but
Yeah.
it's not fine
And you
anymore.
can have literally another career on top of it. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
and how do you finance a 30-year retirement? Even with a 40-year career, when you start to do the math. So, and I recognize that some people are fine financially, but the majority of people that I talk to,
Majority. No,
they're really not.
no, they're
Uh,
really
Aging parents, kids stay at home longer. There's a whole bunch of reasons, right?
so true. I have one final question.
Hmm.
What would be the benefits of re-engaging with the large group of baby boomers? What would be all the
Oh man,
benefits that would come
you
from that?
know, for the very first time, really the only time in our history has this demographic outnumbered those under the age of 15, not engaging this enormous pool that are willing and able to share their talent seems ridiculous. And I think the impact is obvious, not just on the economy, but the healthcare system as
Mhm,
well, as
mhm.
older people stay relevant, engaged, connected. It's like I asked a group of people the other day, if you were operating business today and you wanted to do a national marketing campaign, would you leave out the province of Ontario?
Right?
Most,
No.
most would say no, but that's what's happening when you don't consider this demographic.
Sure.
In fact, if age 45 and plus were a province, it would be the biggest one in Canada with
Wow.
15.8 million people compared to Toronto's 12.1 million, right?
Whoa.
So there are 54% of boomers polled are considering starting a new business.
Yeah.
Um, there's a total of 1.2 million or something have home-based businesses. So there's this talent pool. It's the legacy part that really troubles me, to see wisdom and experience and knowledge walk out the door, just simply
Yeah.
walk out. I don't know how any like right-minded president or CEO could allow that to happen.
Agreed.
Right? Like, why aren't we capturing this wisdom at minimum? Right?
Agreed.
So,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
it's an amazing study. Um, and I'm hoping that we can play a small part in making some kind of change. I have this quote from Betty White. She said, "Unless you're a banana, you'll get better with age." And she said, and heck, with a little imagination, even old bananas can play a part in creating something new.
Yeah,
Right? So
banana bread.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Colleen, thank you so much for sharing this wonderful podcast with us. I'm delighted that you're doing this work, and we need more and more of you because it's important initiatives. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for your time. Again, I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you. Everyone, thanks for joining us on AG's podcast, and we'll see you next time.